Segment 3, Golden Black Live. Kyle Charters joins me, and we have our wonderful sponsors, Triple X on the hill, but on the level of State Farm tradition. No, a Purdue tradition since 1929. John Basham and Basham Reynolds already working on the 2017-18 school year. I'm trying to figure out how to pay for it for 2 kids, but working on that as well. State Farm agent Trent Johnson, trentismyagent.com. And, of course, Hilton Garden Inn when tomorrow's a big day, State HGI tonight. Tomorrow will be a big day for Purdue football. Stacey Clarity is somewhere north of the Wisconsin Dells driving to Minneapolis. And I think it's a first for the Golden Black staff to drive to Minneapolis. But
I got in a car accident when I worked for the Exponent driving up. That was fun. Basketball game. Yeah.
For basketball in the snow?
Basketball in the snow. It was thrilling. Ended up in the median on the interstate, got pulled out, got to the game for the second half, however.
Oh, you
and
so
was
you
able
drove
to
on
file
game
my
day?
story. Yeah, I drove up on game day.
And where, so like a January type, what year?
Yeah, what year would that have been? It probably would have been around 2000, probably,
Yeah.
somewhere in there. I don't know how we got into this story, but it was
Yeah, it's
behind a semi, and I thought we were in the right-hand lane, didn't realize that we were actually in the left-hand lane. So he was kicking all the snow up on me. I wanted to get around him. I pulled into what I thought was the left-hand lane, pulled into the median.
And that
didn't go very well.
That did not go well. That did not go well. All right, now that we've determined, because Kyle just came back from women's basketball availability, we know that the Boilermakers will be taking on Ursuline College, and we now know where Ursuline College is, which is the if we have the right one, which we think we do, southeast of a little bit of southeastern part of Cleveland, Ohio, and the Boilermakers will have their first and only exhibition game. Is that right?
Yep.
And what's new with Sharon Versup, and what are you kind of expecting out of this team on the front end?
Well, I think it's pretty interesting to watch them because they do have a whole lot of new parts. I mean, I think they have 8 underclassmen, which is a lot. So they're going to have to contribute. They really like Ariana Harris, who's a power forward, sort of a defensive shot blocker, rebounder, something they were really missing last year. Didn't really have a 4-player who could defend and board, had to play really undersized. Now, they might play undersized at times this year, but at least now they have some flexibility to put some bodies out there too. Might be missing a couple players for the exhibition. Sounds like maybe Tiara Murphy, not a major injury, but no reason to play her. Might not play on Sunday. And Bree Horrocks has had, I would have to look up what the issue was. I can't remember off the top of my head, but has had some sort of minor injury that she might be out on Sunday as well. But yeah, I mean, just, a tune-up game. We'll see a little bit. I think they have some questions, but, if the young players come along, maybe they can do something.
Yeah, Tiara Murphy will be a big part of this team just
No
because
doubt.
of point guard. You've got to be able to take care of business from that position.
She's a question mark. A question mark / a key to the season because
Yeah.
you just don't. She played a little bit last year, and when she played, she did some good things. But there are other questions. How well will she defend? Because Sharon likes a point guard who will defend. How well does she know what's going on from an X's and O's point of view? We really didn't see much of that last year because she just came in occasionally and could score some. So it's something to watch.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, and she's certainly not a physical presence.
No.
She's not she's relatively slight, and yet she's not afraid to. She certainly came in against Oklahoma last year
Yeah.
and made an instant
No
impact.
fear. I mean,
Yeah.
she doesn't play. She's going to try and score. It's just she's not very big, so she's going to have some matchup issues defensively there. We'll see. Purdue's going to try and score a little bit more this year. They haven't really done that in the last 10 years. I think just a couple times they've averaged more than 70 points a game. We're just under that last year, and they want to try and score this year. So we'll see if they're able to do it.
Dominique McBride also certainly had a streak, especially last year, where she really did well, and she was a pretty darn good freshman. And
I think,
where does she go?
She could be really good, I think. She's tried to work on her outside game a little bit, dribbling, shooting. She sort of reassembled her shot during the offseason, which is a hard thing to do. So that will be interesting to see whether, you can practice, I think, a shooting form, but when it comes to game day, can you actually execute it when you're, under pressure and things? She had a tendency to, bring the ball up this way a little bit and shoot. It's sort of a weird angle on the camera there, but bring it across her head and has tried to keep everything in line on the right side of her body. And, that would help her a lot as a perimeter player. She's really good in the paint, but if she can do both things, I think she can be I think she can be a real dynamic player. Maybe, in the same form, a little bit of like a Lindsey Wisdom Hilton, Dre Mingo type that Purdue's had here in recent history.
Yeah, it certainly got off to a pretty good start last year in her freshman season. All right, the Purdue now travels to the football team heads to Minnesota, and obviously this is a big. I don't know if test is the right word. It's going to be a big challenge for Purdue to make this a 4-quarter game against a team in Minnesota, which I don't think is great, but they certainly have a lot to play for. And one would think that they will do their best to take care of business tomorrow. But do you maybe stand a chance of catching them napping?
I think that Minnesota is not great. However, they are great at the things that Purdue's really bad at,
Yeah.
which is a bad combination, I think. Minnesota can run the ball. They are going to run the ball. There's no doubt about it. I mean, last week, I think 48 of their 67
yeah.
snaps were
Really 61, I thought. But I don't
somewhere
know.
in
Yeah.
there were rushes. They're at about 80%, 75%, somewhere in there all season, I think. Basically a 2-to-1 for run versus pass. They're going to run it and run it again, and Purdue has not shown an ability aside from the Nevada game, which I think was poorly coached by Nevada, of an ability to stop the run, and that's going to be a problem. It's not just the guys up front. I think it's as much, in my opinion, the guys in the back half of the defense, the corners, where Purdue's had a lot of issues that are not coming up and being able to set edges and make tackles, get off blocks. It's been a problem, and I just don't know how much it can get better. It's, as you've put number crunching together, it's a historically bad running rush defense.
Almost. Well, it is. It's at a period where they just have, and this has been a problem we've been talking about really for years, but it's gotten exponentially worse.
That's the frustrating thing. It's been bad, and it's not getting any better. It's going the opposite direction, and that's difficult. Maybe they get Jake Replogle back on Saturday. We don't have as much information when it comes to injuries as we used to, not being able to go to practice. So there's not a whole lot of indicators there other than time, and you feel like maybe after 3 weeks he's gotten that cleared up in the head injury a little bit, and perhaps he could play. But again, he will help, but it's outside the tackles that they really are getting gashed for huge yardage. And, Saquon Barkley is a really good player. Really good.
He's not Red Grange.
No, but he's really good.
Yeah, he is good. He's going to be.
But there were some times where Purdue, especially late in that game, just lost him completely, and that's the part that they need to be better at.
It's hard to go 81 yards around the end and not get touched, and I think he did not get touched on that run, and that's
and that was defensive backs. They had a safety come down and fill the wrong hole, it looked like, and then a cornerback who just got completely turned around by the wide receiver and knocked out of the play.
And off you went.
All of a sudden, Barkley, who probably runs a 4.3 something, I would guess. That dude is fast.
Yeah.
It didn't take him a whole lot of time to get in the second level and take advantage of those mistakes.
You look at Purdue's football situation and obviously preparing the way for a regime change and a new coaching staff to come. And Jared Parker, I think, by all accounts, has done a really good job of at least trying to infuse enthusiasm. He certainly is. The times we get in front of him, or at least I see him during the week, which is a couple of times, he makes you believe that they're gonna do whatever they can. I think that they are trying to do that, but what is a reasonable expectation for where this program should look after the bucket game for the next coach? What if you're trying to make this program be at least take a step forward, get something done in these last 4 weeks? What would that be?
Man, that's a tough question, because I just don't know. He wants to be able to change the culture into one that believes it can win football games. And I understand why he wants to do that, because it's the one thing that in 6 weeks you have at least a little bit of control over. You can control the attitude to a certain extent. You can influence the attitude of the players, sort of how they approach the game. He can't fix the personnel.
No.
It is what it is. You're not going to mid-season, free agent acquisition. You just can't. So he can't fix those things. Now, the problem I see is that at what point here do the players, and this is human nature, not just,
We're not
Purdue
being
having
critical, yeah,
bad attitudes or something like that. It is simply human nature that you can invest a whole lot in this, and Purdue, I think, has over the last couple of weeks, and then they haven't gotten the results. And the results were bad this last week. So at what point do you, just as a person, start tuning it out a little bit and being, there's 4 weeks left. We're not going to be bowl eligible. What are we playing for here? We're going to have a new coach. The program's changing. All those things. And I think that starts to sneak in a little bit. And that's what Parker's sort of fighting against. He's fighting against that, and he's fighting against, what I guess has been a culture in which there has not been as much emotional investment as what he sees is needed. That's criticism of the former coach, even if he doesn't want to make it that way. I think that that's what it is, and that's hard to change in a couple of weeks, especially when you're not getting results. If he was doing these things and then they'd win, well, heck, it works. But if you do these things and then you get outscored 45-7 in the second half of one of those games,
Makes it
it's
tough.
rough.
Yeah, you would think too, a selling point, which is you got to sell young 18 to 22-year-olds, as they always say, about the ability to show up well on film, because the next guy's going to look at the kind of effort that you gave in those last 3 or 4 weeks for those guys that are returning. But again, that's a hard thing. That's kind of a little bit of an out of sight, out of mind thing at times for these guys. We talked about the secondary and its inability to, a lot of youth, a lot of inexperience down there. This is not something we really honestly didn't expect. We expected it to be a real struggle back there. Almost another historic low in passes broken up. Again, you want to. Those guys have got to get themselves in a situation where they can start making plays if you're going to have anything good happen.
And Brian might be able to speak better to this than me. This has been brewing for a few years. Purdue has had an incredible number of decommitments from the secondary.
Right, that's true.
Chris Jones, who starts for Nebraska, was originally committed to Purdue. I'm going to have trouble remembering all the names off the top of my head. I wasn't prepared to talk about it.
Yeah.
Ladarius Wiley, I'm
Yeah.
not sure where he ended up. He was originally, I believe, committed to Purdue. There have been numerous others. And then some guys who just didn't make it academically. So, Purdue tried to scramble and fill here a little bit. And now they're playing with guys who, while they might be able to play at some point, they are extremely young. And maybe you can do that with one guy out there because you can sort of hide him a little bit, give him some help. But when you are in a situation where, Purdue has been at times down 5 cornerbacks,
Yeah.
when you add for one reason or the other, and it was no fault to Kamal Hardy. He just got injured so early in the season. I actually wrote last week they were down 4 cornerbacks, forgetting that Kamal had been hurt in week 2 and hasn't been out there either. So
a junior college guy too.
yeah,
right?
so he a little bit older guy who might be able to be helping you a little bit right now if he was out there. But Kamal and Miles Norwood hasn't been in there, and the 2 guys who are out for disciplinary reasons, and Tim Kason gets dinged up a little bit last week, and all of a sudden you're playing with a true freshman and a redshirt freshman along with DeJuan Hutton. It's just, you were too thin there anyway, and now you're just down to guys who you hadn't planned on playing this early.
All right, on to a brighter subject, and that's the Chicago Cubs. And Kyle is our baseball expert because he certainly does play-by-play for Purdue baseball, and admittedly a Cub fan. I don't know how to weave this into some Purdue thing, but in terms of team dynamic, it was pretty exciting. I think there were probably a lot of members of the Purdue football team, just about everybody in the country that liked sports or liked human interaction, liked watching this game this week. But anything we learned from that in terms of that streak finally being over, winning is possible. What do you take from that?
I suppose if you try and relate it to our conversation, it's that that became a young team with some veteran leadership that believed at some point that it could win.
Yeah.
And that was pretty evident, I think, on Wednesday night, with the
Yeah.
stories being told now and were immediately after the game, which Jason Hayward, who hadn't done as much on the field as what people wanted him to do, having signed a $184 million contract, gathered them together. And Jared Parker is preaching right now belief. He talked about that on Tuesday. Stacy wrote a story about it on our site. And, I think that was Jason Hayward's message too on Wednesday night, is that we got here and we have to remember to believe that we can still win this game despite, momentum not being in our favor. And, that team bought into that. Now it's a talented team too, which, helps certainly. But I think that's the message that's trying to be portrayed here. And whoever the next coach is going to have to continue that, and then also be able to build that culture, but also be able to go out and get some more players, because ultimately you can talk like that and do all those things, but you have got to be able to put more talented depth on the field. Purdue has some; they need more.
That's
It'd be nice to see him do something like the Cubs did, because that was a pretty good a pretty good ride.
Yeah, I think anybody that was ever remotely associated or been a fan of the Cubs or a fan of, like I said, of baseball enjoyed that, and a great story actually for Chicago and a great story for Cleveland. And my guess is Cleveland may have its opportunity before long as well. All right, Kyle, we want to thank you, and we will be back next week. Landon Feichter will join us, and Landon's been writing a column for us with Stacy on each Friday during the week. And it'll be interesting to get his perspective on Purdue football and maybe what might be ahead for Purdue football. And we'll look forward to doing that next week on Golden Black Live. But we want to thank also Gordon Jackson and Cammie Bowerman and the good folks at WLFI for helping us get this put together. And our sponsors, XXX, John Basham and Basham Reynolds, Hilton Garden Inn, and State Farm agent Trent Johnson. We thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week on Golden Black Live.